Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on good judge, bad judge. This is a high conflict child custody video because everything I'm about to say in this video only applies to child custody cases and other domestic relations matters. This video will go over a few topics. I'm going to discuss what makes a good judge, what the chances are of ending up with a good judge. And I'm also going to break it down into a few other categories, I guess you could say. And um, the family division is a completely different animal from the non-family division. We don't have another name for judges who aren't in the family division. They're just called judges. Just that's it. Whereas judges that are in the family division are specifically mentioned as such. With those types of situations, if you're not in some kind of domestic case, you're just in an ordinary courtroom with a district judge. The only thing I can tell you to be concerned about is self-representation bias, and I did a whole separate video on what that is. That is a very real thing in those courts. It is very likely that you will encounter that type of bias, and it is no joke, and it is a problem. But all of the other problems that I'm going to go into in this video, all the little teeny tiny details I'm about to discuss, are just for the family division courts. Some people are in rural counties or rural locations where there is no family division and the judge just hears all sorts of cases: personal injury, car accident, and divorce. He hears everything. I don't think that I can really say that this video would apply to those judges either. It seems that over time there's this culture in the family division, um, this culture of the easy thing is the best thing to do, yet it seems like over the decades, the system, the family division system, has sort of convinced itself that the easy thing is also the right thing to do. And what I mean by that is, it seems to me like there was a choice at some point when the family division was created. That choice was that they were going to run things like any other courtroom. They were going to apply the rules of civil procedure, the rules of evidence. They were going to adhere to statutes, rules, and case law, and they were going to follow the law. Or the other choice, which is to just do what's best for the kids and forget the law. And I think that the easier choice is the second choice because it doesn't require any research, not of just the judges, but also of the attorneys. And I feel like over time, after a long time, they started to convince themselves that actually the easy choice, which is to just do the best you can for the kids and ignore the law, is the right choice. And trying to do all this legal research is actually bad and could cause, families to suffer because the law is bad or something. I don't understand where they came to this conclusion, but it seems to me that things started out with, let's venture out on the easy road, and then became, well, the easy road is the right road. Anyone who wants to do, legal analysis and research the law and find out what the law says you're supposed to do in these situations must be a bad person who's trying to abuse a child or just win, doesn't care about what's... This is sort of what I'm about to go into, and this is sort of what I'm going to say I think is at the root of incompetence in the family or division, the family court system. And so if anyone's wondering sort of how it ended up becoming so different from, because right in the beginning of the video I mentioned that this doesn't apply to non-family division judges. If anyone's wondering how it became so completely different, I think that's how it happened. I think it wandered off in that direction, and after so many years, so many judges and attorneys just believe that's the way to do it, that if you try and go back to the old way, which is to, do really good legal research and provide the court with a strong briefing on whatever issues before the court, is a weird attorney, and any judge who wants to make rulings in that way is a weird judge, and you just end up standing out as a problem because you don't fit in with all of the other judges and attorneys who just want to do the right thing and to heck with the law. Well, before I get really, started on what I was going to talk about in this video, I do just want to say that I've gone through this. Well, I'm done now. I terminated Max's parental rights, but I went through this for 8 years, and I can say that not only with my own case, but all of the other cases, the people who send me messages, friends and stuff who've gone through the system, I can say that the idea of just winging it, shooting from the hip, and not doing any research at all because law is bad and the judge should just do what's best for the kids no matter what, that's not working. People are suffering. Legal mistakes are being made, and children are suffering from it. If I guess if winging it and just doing what's best for the kids equates to midnight exchanges for my son from the ages of 2 to 9, equates to 5 crowns and 2 extractions. If it equates to that kind of stuff, I think it's pretty clear that maybe the other side, which is to follow the law, isn't going to be perfect, but at the very least you could say that the side of let's just wing it and see what happens is far, far from perfect, and in fact is causing all the legal mistakes that are coming from it is starting to really connect to some of the abuse and neglect that children are suffering, and all of the other, there's so many issues that I've gone over that are connected to this, so many other videos I can refer to. One of the big ones is that end of filings is not end of abuse. That's just one of the many nonsensical ideas that some of these judges and attorneys have. There's so, like I said, there's a lot of, it's like a giant spider web that's connected to this central principle of law being bad and ignore the law and just do what's right for the kids. Which I don't want to, I'm just going to end up opening a can of worms if I go too much into that. But definitely watch that video if you haven't seen it. End of filings is not end of abuse, because that's one of the biggest mistakes judges and attorneys make in the family division, is they assume that once everyone stopped filing, everything is just working out with that family. Everything's hunky-dory and great, which is completely, completely not true. What happened is the protective parent just gave up. Half the time, maybe 3/4 of the time, I don't know what percentage of the time it is that's happening, but that is happening. That's not a rare occurrence. Anyway, so let's get into the video. 4 types of judges. That's what I've seen. That's not necessarily what I've experienced, but because I've created this channel and I've started to take input in from other people, I've started to see some of the other types of judges. And I guess I'll just go right into it. The worst case scenario is a corrupt or capricious judge. These judges are rare. We're talking the Cash for Kids scandal in Pennsylvania, where the judges were sending children to some kind of institutions, and they were getting kickbacks, monetary kickbacks in return for it. Capricious judges who have preconceived notions as to what's right and will ignore the law and exercise bias on purpose because they're convinced that the bias is appropriate and correct. Some of these were pro-mom judges from the old days. I don't think there's many of these left. Maybe there's a teeny tiny handful of them left. But if you go back 20 years ago, there were still quite a few of these judges who were arbitrary and capricious, who were convinced that these biases were actually the best way to go, that was best for the kids, and they and then I mentioned corrupt in the sense of taking money and stuff, besides Cash for Kids scandal, but just ruling in the favor of the people who gave them donations for their campaign and stuff like that. These are rare. I did not encounter these in the family court. I did encounter one of these in another case, a non-family case, and I reported him to the Commission on Judicial Discipline, and he was investigated and interrogated and all that. So I don't think he's doing that anymore. But yeah, as I mentioned, these are pretty rare. I never really interacted with one of these judges in the family division. I think if I was going to throw a percentage on it, and again, I'm just kind of throwing this number out there. This is not like a scientific calculation that I've come up with it's just what I think. It's a fuzzy number, but people want to know these numbers, even though they know they're not like I mentioned, they're not like scientific and exact. They still want to know. My viewers want to know. So I'll say 5% chance that you're going to end up with one of these judges. It's just not very likely. It's still kind of a high. I think, in my opinion, that number is still high. But I do feel like with some of the stuff I've seen out there, they are not very common, but they're there. The next type of judge I'm going to say is the incompetent judge. This judge just doesn't know what he's doing. They don't understand people. They don't understand family dynamics. They don't understand the law, and they're just flat out incompetent. They usually will try to pass the buck anytime a decision comes before them. They'll send the parents to mediation over and over and over. They'll appoint a parenting coordinator. They'll appoint a guardian ad litem. They'll do everything that they can to avoid rendering a decision. They'll put the decision onto all these other people, or they'll send the parties back, or they'll coerce settlement. These are the judges who are really obsessed with settlement, because if people settle and something goes wrong, you can just blame the people. It's not the court's fault. They agreed to it. It's a great way to conceal the fact that you don't know what you're doing, because your decisions can't be challenged. If everyone is settling, nobody can appeal. The only decisions that can be appealed are those that are entered against one party's objection. So, I mean, these are typical things that incompetent judges do. They are out there. The percentage that I would throw out on that one is probably 25%. I feel like they're out there, and 25% is a pretty big number, but there's a good chance that you'll end up with one of those judges, one of the incompetent judges. The next judge is the one that I think most people end up with, and I'm gonna say that this one is probably gonna be probably 70% chance, and that is just the judge that just doesn't care. It's a paycheck. They go to work, they collect their paycheck. They don't care. They really don't. And mainly, I'm not going to say it's always because they're just jerks. I think it's because they become jaded, and they feel like their job doesn't matter much anyway. Whatever decision they make isn't going to matter. And so they're just going to work. And over the years, they've gotten to the point where that's all it is. It's just a job. And they know the law, but because they don't care, they don't really put a whole lot of effort into looking into it. They're going to do the least amount of work possible. Their main goal is going to be to get rid of you. But if you keep coming back, you may be able to actually get a good decision from them. And if you do a lot of the work for them, you will find yourself in an advantageous position. You know, I don't like to say it that way, because attorneys are supposed to brief the court. It's not really doing the judge's job. It's doing the job that the attorney is supposed to do. And if you don't have an attorney, then you're acting as your own attorney, and it is your job to brief the court. So maybe I shouldn't really say it that way. If you do what you're supposed to do, you're likely to have a decent decision from one of these judges, because even though they don't care, they'll probably read your briefs if they're not inane, if they contain, you know, good legal analysis, and they're not too long and they stick to the facts. They'll probably read your brief, and if you're right, they'll probably rule in your favor. You just can't expect this type of judge to really go above and beyond for you. And I mean, this is the type of judge that I had both times. The judge that it was a paycheck. They came to work, and they made all sorts of mistakes when they didn't care. Like when I, filed some kind of motion that had to do with like some obscure issue to execute on some asset or something. They didn't care. They just would render a really quick decision, get rid of me. They didn't care that it was wrong. When in the beginning of my case, when I didn't brief the court, they winged it. Like I have a video on winged judges. That's what they did, because nobody briefed them. And so since nobody briefed them, they're not going to do the work. They're just going to come to work and say, or they're going to come to your hearing and they're going to say, well, none of the attorneys had put any time into their briefs, so I'm not going to put any time into the case. I'm just going to tell you both you're bad parents. Work together. This is another thing that these types of judges do. They give you a bunch of canned answers. It's like they have a little script. You know, shame on you both. You're supposed to do this for your kids, blah, blah, blah. Well, that may be true for most parents, but there's actually some situations where one parent is dysfunctional and a high conflict parent, and the other parent's doing everything they can for the child. And in those cases, those little canned answers, those are like nails on a chalkboard for that parent, because that parent is anything but a high conflict parent. And they're trying to work things out for the child, and to be told, you know, it's their fault too when they need to work together. When the other parent has a personality disorder or severe emotional insecurity issues, um, it makes them feel like it's all a kangaroo court. It's just a joke. So of course, like I mentioned earlier, if you do a tremendous amount of work and you brief the court and you know, put together a really good presentation at a hearing, you'll win your case. You just have to make sure that you do all that work. Like I said, 70% chance you're going to get this type of judge. Um, so this is what, you know, you should expect this. Also, if you're going to use a peremptory challenge of judge, use it on an incompetent judge or a, you know, one, corrupt, whatever I mentioned for the first judge. Those really rare ones. Use it for those. Don't use it on one of these judges who just, the 70%, just the bulk of judges who just, they kind of just, it's just a job and a paycheck. Don't use a peremptory challenge of judge on them, because you're going to just end up with another one or a worse one. Don't expect that you're going to get a good judge, which is what I was going to go into next, which is the good judge. Oh, I'll probably mention this towards the end of my video, never mind. So good judge, I think I went through 70, a 20, and a 5, which is 95%. That's about right, because 5% chance is about what your chance is to get a good judge in the family division. What I mean by good judge is this judge really cares. And if you come to court not having done any work, not understanding anything about the law, this judge will probably do the research for both sides. This judge will probably be more understanding if you make mistakes. Like say your ex baited you and you reacted in a way that wasn't appropriate. This judge may look, you know, into the details as to what was going on and say, you know what, you shouldn't have said that, but I can get why you did because of what they did. Whereas a judge who just doesn't care about their job, they're going to just be like, look, you both have issues, get out of here. They're not going to try and find out if one person was baiting the other and all that. They don't do it. It's too much work for them. The good judge will do a tremendous amount of work for both sides. The good judge will research and apply the law. The good judge cares about the children. A good judge will reject stipulations that both parties agree to that don't make any sense or are not in the best interest of the child. The good judge will understand certain things that don't work, and even if the parties want it, the good judge will say no. Like, I've seen judges say, no, I'm not ordering first right of refusal, because this is what happens. I don't care that you both agree. If you want to do that outside of the court order, fine, but I'm not going to order it because here's what I've seen happen. Good judge will not just assume everything that the opponent's attorney is saying is true. A good judge will understand that both attorneys are just trying to win at all costs, and that the judge will need to actually carefully consider what's being asserted and rule accordingly as to what's best for the kids. Good judge won't do that nonsensical, I gave this guy this many things, so I have to make sure I give the other guy something so that they feel good. I don't know why some of the judges, I mean, I do know why some of the judges do that. Because they want it to seem like both sides won and lost, and that they cared about both sides. Sometimes one side is just nuts, and everything they want is bad for the kids. And sometimes the other side has to win on everything because that's what's best for the kid. That's another thing I might do a video on, but I sometimes pejoratively use the term best interest of the parents. Those other types of judges, they may not realize it, they may not understand that they're doing this, but a lot of times they're, you know, making decisions based on the best interest of the parents. Like I said, they don't realize they're doing it, but they become so concerned, so obsessed with how the parents are going to feel that they forget that they're there for the best interest of the child. The good judge won't make that mistake. The last thing is, because the good judge understands the law, they're not going to obsess over settlement. A good judge will understand that citizens have a right to court access, and that they're not always right. And that because they're not always right, sometimes a citizen needs to file an appeal. Sometimes mediation is not appropriate, and the judge needs to render a decision, an adverse decision, and understand their role in the legal system and accept that this may need to go over their head and they may need to get some kind of response from an appellate court. All those other types of judges, they don't appreciate appeals. I don't necessarily think the incompetent judge and the don't care it's a paycheck judge are going to hold it against you that you win an appeal, whereas the arbitrary, capricious, and corrupt judge will. The good judge understands that this is a part of the legal process, and I'm not always right. So if you file an appeal and win, I'm going to not only respect that, but I'm going to understand that I made a mistake, and I'm going to adhere to that appellate disposition. So I mean, this is a rare type of judge because it takes a lot of work to be that type of judge. It takes a little bit of emotional investment. The attorneys aren't doing their jobs because they're lazy, and so the judge has to go do it for them because that's what's best for the kids. So they do it. And they are also going to be the most understanding of a non-attorney, a person who's representing themselves. They're also going to be the most likely to treat that person with respect, and they're going to rule against the other side if they have an attorney if they're wrong, even though you're representing yourself. All in all, this type of judge is extremely rare. It's not likely you're going to get this type of judge. And what you should take from that is you're going to have to do your own research, because the most common type of judge will rule in your favor if you kind of lead them by the hand, like I had to do in my case. My son ended up protected because of everything I did. That judge was not, taking proactive steps to protect my son. Neither of those two judges were. Those two judges were responding to what I was demanding. And I hate to use that word, but that's the way I saw it, because it's not that they didn't want to do the right thing. It's they didn't know what the right thing to do. They didn't know what it was. They had no idea what they were supposed to do. So I had to file motions, lots and lots and lots of motions. And when I noticed they started to rule against me because of some subjective idea as to who they thought I was and what they thought was best, then I started to have to learn how to go over their head. But it worked. And that's the message that I hope a lot of you get from this video. There's a 70% chance, and of course the number is not scientific, but there's a 70% chance you're going to get a paycheck judge. They go in for the paycheck. They don't care that much. But as long as you do all the caring for them, which is not really that unreasonable because you're the parents of your children, so you should care a whole lot about it. As long as you do all the caring and you go in there and you brief the court as much as you can and you provide the court with as much information as possible, and if you have an evidentiary hearing, you bring all of the witnesses that you possibly can that matter, you'll probably win and you'll probably be able to protect your child. It's not the worst case scenario. It's not what many people think. Many people watch Judge Judy and they think you just go in and talk and the judge is going to do a great job and have all kinds of opinions and make decisive rulings. No, that doesn't happen. Especially not the decisive rulings thing. You're not going to get those unless you demand it, unless you make the request and support it with points and authorities, statutes, rules, and case law. At this point, I wanted to mention one last thing, and I'm going to do a separate video on this where I go into detail. I kind of touched on the fact that a lot of these family judges feel like their job doesn't matter. In fact, there is actually research on this. I'm not going to cite it because I don't know where it is, but I think it's online. There was like a study or something. They don't think their job matters because they've become jaded from the whole the concept of two bad parents. And what I mean by that is two parents come into court and they're both bad. When two parents come into court and they're both good, they just work it out. They may come into one single hearing and that's it. They're done. They've got it. They raise their kids amazingly well. The court never sees them again. The other options, there's two options, and that is that there's one good parent, one bad parent, or that there's just two bad parents. Believe it or not, I think that based on what I've seen, I think they feel that the parents who continue to come to court are two bad parents. I think they, with some judges, it may even be to the point where they think the whole one good parent, one bad parent idea is just, that's like a unicorn situation. It's just that rare. And like I was mentioning earlier, it's that they've become jaded and they've stopped understanding people. They've stopped understanding that it may appear that there's two bad parents, but one of them may be reacting to the other one, and that they don't understand that it's making their case worse because the judge is so jaded that they don't really have time to pick apart and figure out which parent is best. And I'm not trying to really speak comparatively, like in the sense of which one has a better job and which one, stuff like they used to do in the past. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about when I say, um, comparatively or whatever, is I mean the one that's high conflict because they get some kind of satisfaction out of being high conflict, and the one that's high conflict because they've been sucked into it. Like they wouldn't mind having, a great peaceful life protecting their child, but they're so unable to understand court dynamics and how important it is to not respond in certain ways, um, that they kind of end up getting just lumped into being a bad parent also. Like I said, I'm going to do another video on this, but what I was going to sort of end this video with was the idea that I feel like that's at the root of the whole thing behind why some of the judges are getting jaded, is because they just see that so many times and they're just sick and tired of spending time trying to figure out which one's better. They're just sick and tired of it. They don't want to do it anymore. And so you end up in this situation where they just don't want to get, really into that case. They just want to get rid of you. They just want to send you off to all these other providers or have you mediate and sort things out yourself, rather than trying to figure out whether or not one of the parties is severely dysfunctional or has mental health issues, stuff like that. So what to take away from that is to do everything that you can to contrast yourself from the other parent. Even if it comes down to not reacting with rage or indignance when, based on what's just happened, you'd be well within your rights to, I've mentioned before, it's not always about explaining yourself. When it comes to winning in court, it's way better to just not have done something so you don't have to explain it in the first place, because that's just one more thing to go over, to discuss at a hearing. So I'll go ahead and do another video on two bad parents. I'll probably do that next, and I'll talk a little bit more about why it's an issue and why you should focus on that if you're going through one of these cases. So I guess with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video, and I will see you guys next time.